Ah, vous avez passé sur iTunes. On peut pas le télécharger.
Non, je ne vais pas télécharger, je veux seulement faire
Ouais,
le
d'accord, ouais, j'ai compris.
full
Partagez.
screen. Partager, oui.
Yes, ce sera plus simple. Bon,
Oh, ça va,
if it's not fine for you.
ça va. D'accord.
Fantastic. Good luck.
Merci, bonjour tout le monde. Is it working? Can you hear me on the back? Is it fine? Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for coming all the way here and risking a global pandemic just to see my talk. I'm very happy about it. So what I'd like to do, this is not the same presentation I have given before. I changed a little bit. So I would like to talk a little bit about scaling, right? And of course, Ethereum scaling. And my point, it's all handmade by the way, it's an artisanal presentation. So here's my point about scaling, right? We talk a lot about scaling. And of course, we know that scaling on Ethereum is not completely solved. But I have a question, and the question is it solved enough? What I mean is we've been trying to do a lot of interesting things. And we have a lot of good solutions that will work, but will have a few problems, will be centralized in one way, or will be somehow, you have some sort of trust model. But is that a deal breaker for most projects, right? For a lot of projects, being able to scale using one of those solutions that we've been trying to will be good enough for you, right? Maybe you have, all you need is XDAI, right? Maybe you trust a couple, like if you're trusting a central server for maybe one thing, and maybe you can trust XDAI. And we have all those like trials, we've done state channels, Plasma, Rollup. By the way, I think it's fantastic that the Plasma group is a group that was funded, got like $1 million of funding, did research for a year, came to the conclusion that Plasma was not going to work. They gave back all the money and they renamed themselves to Optimism. Right, and I think this is such a beautiful metaphor for what Ethereum is, right? They just renamed themselves for Optimism because they are still optimistic about scaling. But my point is, what I'm trying to say here, if we just focus on, hey, we want to get like scaling working and it needs to be working for everyone, and if we don't solve the usability problem, I think we are gonna be in a situation a little bit like this, right? Where it's already for millions and billions of people, but there are no customers out there, right? You're just creating this huge expectation that you're gonna be creating this huge system for 1 billion transactions, and you haven't solved usability. You haven't solved the problems with the users. And we see that all the time. And we need to think that if a user loses their money, we can't blame the user, right? Even if it's their fault, and most of the time it is their fault, right? I'm not saying that you're gonna create a system that is foolproof. And there's a great quote saying that the problem of trying to create foolproof systems is that you are underestimating the creativity of a fool, because they are always able to find out some way in which they can script themselves. I'm not saying that if your users are really stupid and do something very bad, you are to blame. What I'm saying, though, is that we didn't get to where we are today by making our users smarter. And I think that's something I sort of remember. We take this for granted. We take for granted that everyone in the world has a computer in their pocket, right? We take for granted that you have billions of users of computers, and at some point, most of us started using computers when it felt like it was everything, but in truth, when we started using computers, most of us in this room, there were maybe 100 million computers, 30 million computers in the world. And I remember back then, the first people who were seeing computers, and we knew it was a big deal. And a lot of people were saying, look, the computers are great, the computers are smart, we just need to get the user educated about it, right? The computers don't need to change. Just need to change the users. And I've been hearing that for decades even. But the truth is, if you try to change the user and not the computer, you're going to be limited by the amount of users you have right now. The way we got from 10 million computers in the world to maybe 4 billion pocket computers that everyone can use is not by teaching 4 billion people how to use DOS, right? It was not teaching them how to use Windows 95, which was already good enough for most people. It was really by being smarter about our computers. It's not even about having the computers be smarter. It is a little bit about that too, of course. But it's also about being smarter on the way we deal with computers. And what I'm going with this is that if we build a whole financial system based on a single point of failure, whose blame is it? Is it, like, of course it does, right? But we can blame the user and tell them, look, if you can't bother to just write down a seed phrase, then like you shouldn't be owning Bitcoin, you shouldn't be using Ethereum. And that might be true today, but the problem is this idea that you hold funds in private keys there's no way around it. You can't scale that usability because at some point it's too binary. Like you either have access to the full private key and you have full access to the funds, or you don't. And if too many people have access to those funds, you lose it all. That is a very hard. That system where it's too binary is very hard for most people to navigate on. And we don't solve that either by just putting the same key on the cloud. And there are some very nice solutions out there, and I really appreciate a lot of onboarding solutions that just what they do is they abstract away all the key management by putting an encrypted key on the cloud, which then comes back to the same problem. It's better, but it's still not decentralized because now you have a single point of failure on the cloud. Suddenly, if your cloud goes out, you're back to trusting that the user had made some sort of backup, right? If they lose the key to the cloud, actually it's the same thing, right? If they lose somehow the key to the cloud, that can happen because unless you are doing it in a system that the cloud has full access to your keys, then you're back to the same problem. And now, usually the solution I tell people is I think the way we solve that, in a way, is moving to a smart account. And by moving to a smart account, I mean funds should be stored not on a single key, but in multiple keys. And every key should be in each user devices. But then, in a way, what I'm sort of telling you is that we solve all of that by just giving the little money robot all the keys to your funds. Which then we go back to the problem and say, oh wait, but now the robot he is the single point of failure, right? And we've gone through this. Like the first time I've been talking about universal login for 2 years, started as a research project. We've built all our code on a custom contract, and we were sort of ready to audit it, and we actually spent 2 months trying to formally verify the smart contract. And in fact, there's a whole blog post about how hard it is to formally verify something. Formal verification is not like a unit test that you run it once and then every time you change your contract, it's going to check. Actually, every time you want to run a new formal verification, it's going to take hours. Sometimes it would take a whole night for us. So then the way we solve this problem of, okay, now the money robot is like your little personal money robot is the single point of failure, is that we sort of moved our funds from our own contract to Know the Safe. Know the Safe is still a single contract, but I would argue that Know the Safe is mostly an ecosystem. There are $10 million held in just in Ether, and I think there are at least 2 or 3 million in other tokens. If you take a look at this, this little jump over there, that's an interesting jump. That's when the Noses teams themselves decided that they are going to put their own funds on their own Noses keys, so that's why it made a huge jump. The other very cool thing that it's audited and it's verifiable and it's done by runtime verification. I didn't check the name of but I think it was, forgot the name who did the audit. And it's another cool thing. You can actually insure it on Axios Mutual for less than 2% per year, which means something interesting. And I think I'm pretty sure that's where insurance contracts are going to evolve to. If you put, let's say, DAI on Compound, you can automatically insure your own funds by just taking like a third of your Compound, often less than that, of your Compound winnings by just putting it on Axios, so, right? So I think that's something we should consider, this idea where you put a little bit of money on, let's say for 30 days on DCR or Compound, then you take the 30 days, you use a little bit of that to insure your users' next 30 or 60 days, then we can have a very interesting system in which even if one contract fails, you can still have your users are safe in a way, and that's in a decentralized manner, and I think that's very good. So what I've learned from building Unilog in the past few years, it's a really like development is building a pile of pancakes, and you always think like you're probably ready by the next pancake, you're going to be full of development, but we started just doing the contract-based layer, right? As I said, we've done our own contracts for a while, we formally verified it, and then we realized, okay, that's not enough, because we also need to do the relayer, right? The whole idea of using something as universal login and Noses Safe and many others is this concept of meta transactions. You're not actually paying, never actually signing into transactions yourself. You're always using the keys that you have to sign a transaction that authorizes anyone, and that anyone is usually a relayer, to make the transactions in your behalf. And we build that and we publish the relayer code. Of course, that's not enough, because you want to connect all of those things within a JavaScript SDK, which we thought, okay, that's good enough. It's not actually, because if you're building a blockchain app today, you probably are building it with the idea of using a Web3 provider, which will connect you to MetaMask or whatever your mobile wallet is. So then we basically built a Web3 provider connector to our JavaScript SDK, meaning that everything you request from your Web3 provider, it can just request from your JavaScript. This means it sort of creates a small MetaMask running from inside your browser that converts all your calls to Web3 into a meta transaction code. And I think that's super interesting. And I thought, okay, now that's over. Now we can, but then we realized, oh boy, we still need to build the UI library on top. In fact, interesting thing, we've recently realized that we have twice more code just on our UI repository than we have in all of those others combined. And it's interesting because that's really, truly where a lot of the complexities happen, right? You want to have, you want to keep track of the transactions. You want to keep track of pending transactions. You want to keep track of how many, if someone starts a transaction, then you need to have a second signature. You want to send the message to the user, and you need to keep track of the relayer and all of that. So that's a lot complicated. And I can go on this pile of pancakes, but at some point, like, you have to eat the pancake, right? At some point, you have to ship it. And I think for now, this is our current like breakfast pile, right? This is how we are using our code. And what I like to say is, in a sense, what we want to build is a welcome package for every new Ethereum users, where whenever you onboard them to Ethereum, they get, well, not this. Actually, I'm not sure if what's that doing that. But, I mean, this is probably just a good welcome package for EthCC. What I'm meaning is they get a new Noses Safe, they get a new ENS name, and they get a DAI or some other token, right? So imagine this. Imagine that every new user of your app is going to have all of those three new things, right? And I think that's a very solid. I wonder even how many Ethereum developers are using ENS names or multisig to store their funds or using DAI, right? And the cool thing about DAI or any other token that you want is that thanks to meta transactions, you can actually pay your transactions using that. So imagine you are a firm that made an ICO at some point, and you want to have an internal economy based on your token. And what you actually want is you want your users to do everything in their own token. So that's why it's important to give every user their own tokens, right? And pretty sure I'm legally obligated to show you a demo. I'm going to show you a demo anyway because I like it. Is it? Okay. Wait. Okay, let's see if the demo works. Ah, yes, now it's working. So it's a short demo, right? The idea on onboarding is really that you just type, and this is running on iPad, no download necessary, right? All you need to do is you type a name, and if that name is taken, we are going to help you connect to that name. If that name is not taken, we're going to help you create a new account, right? And the cool thing about this is that as soon as you type a name, we are able to create in a single transaction an ENS name and another safe, and show you an Ethereum address where that is going to work. And actually, like I've already gone through that, but what I could do, in fact, is that I could just show that address to the user and allow the user just to use that address until they're ready to commit funds. And in this case, I already committed some funds. I created, therefore, their nose safe, the ENS name, and everything. And now I'm ready to execute any Ethereum transaction directly from my browser, just using the funds, and with everything is like locally stored and etc. And of course, the cool thing is that as soon as I'm on my iPad, as soon as I log in on my phone or my computer, I'm going to have a second key that is going to authorize me. And I think that's a very interesting way of thinking about usability. And because we went a little bit fast, I'm going to just show you a little bit or like a few screens. So this is a screen that it's just a confirmation transaction. And another cool thing, I think so this is all like Unilogin branded, but it could be a white label to look like any other app. And I think that's important. The reason that's important is there are a lot of onboarding providers on Ethereum. And there are a lot of people who think, look, one of them is going to win, and it's going to be a winner take all. And that's not a scenario that I want, right? I don't want a scenario where there's a single authentication method. What I actually think is the best way of doing it is that if, let's say, you are logged into Kickback, you don't want to have to think about Unilogin or Portis or Ethereum. What I want you to think about it is Kickback. I want you to think that you have now a Kickback account that you can use in other places, right? I think that's the main branding that I want you to take away with, because that's what got you into this space in the first place. And that's actually like, I didn't show you that on the demo, but that's how we connect to devices. We just like show you a few symbols on one device and you confirm that on the other. This is actually a way in which we can confirm that there was no man-in-the-middle attack. I could just show you a public address and ask you to type the public address, or just say, hey, are you sure you want this is the public address? I just do this like very simple game, right? Finally, just update if anyone has been following us for a while. Like we used to be called Universal Login because it was sort of like a project about like Universal Login for Ethereum. We just shortened it to now Unilogin, so I think that's shorter and nicer. And yeah, that's the new branding. And in a way, we are sort of doing the Facebook thing, like just drop the D. I think it's cleaner that way. And that also means we got a new website, and that's what I mean. So I want you to take something away from this talk. I want to think about 3 points, right? The first one is that the future is going to be meta transactions. I think the market demands that the users don't want to think about Ether or paying. They want free transactions, or they want transactions paid in some comfortable token, right? That's important. The second thing, which is important, is that I don't think I want a universe where there's a single authentication method for Ethereum. But we do want one that is decentralized, that doesn't depend on one central server. So let's always think about solutions that do not depend on a single cloud provider providing you authentication, because that's bad. And I think the way we can come together around this is just by focusing on ENS, by giving every user a ENS that they control, that they are on hold on, right? So you can check our new website at onlylogin.io, or Twitter. That's me and my co-founder. And I think that's it. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Alex. That was an incredible talk. I was going to ask the audience if there's any questions that you might want to ask. Please raise your hand. Oh, fantastic.
Can you just clarify, where are the private keys in all of this?
Yes. So it will depend on which sort of device you're using. So in the beginning, we are keeping, if you're running it from a browser, we don't have much of a choice other than keeping your local storage. If you're running from a mobile device, we are going to try to find a way to put it in this secure enclave. But what we think about security is that we believe that having multiple keys, you can sort of go around the security of having weak individual keys. Right? So if you have multiple keys holding your funds, even if one of them is lost, you can recover it by using your other ones. And if one of them is hacked, you can go around it by having daily limits on the amount of the amount of damage that one key can do.
That was great. Some other questions by any chance? Don't be shy. It was pretty interesting. No? Okay.
Thank you. I'll be around the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much.